Hello. Um, yeah, this is actually much sooner than I was expecting to be done with JoJo's Part 4, but here we are. So these are my thoughts. I literally finish it today. Um, and I've got a lot to talk about. It's all fresh in my mind, so I can remember it a lot better. This should be a lot better than the previous one, just because I can remember what's going on. At least some of it. Um, and yeah, so in simple terms, I think this is probably the best part yet, but not by like a particularly wide margin over part three. Um, they're pretty similar in quality. Um, I would say this is like a 7 out of 10. Um, so yeah, basic premise of this one is that we've got Jotaro's uncle, Josuke, in the protagonist role, who is an illegitimate child of Joseph, which I just thought was quite a funny idea in that sort of says a lot about Joseph's character. It kind of recontextualized him a bit for me, which I thought was quite interesting. But either way, um, that's the premise. He goes to visit Josuke. He finds out Josuke has a stand. Then he realizes there's lots of stand users in the town Josuke grew up in, which is called Morio. And the entire manga is set in this town, trying to track down a bow and arrow that can turn people into stand users. Um, and it's a pretty good premise, I think. It's a smaller scale premise for sure, which I kind of appreciated because of how big Part 3 was, and you can't really scale up much more than that. So I appreciate them really toning it down and not trying to be even bigger immediately after Part 3. The stakes are a lot lower. It's just this town. And there's no one trying to like destroy the town even. The main villain is just trying to be a serial killer. Um, and I thought that was pretty great. And it also meant there was a lot more opportunity for just familiarity. It became a very familiar setting. I sort of understood where everything was taking place a lot more than when they were just traveling across the world. And I really came to actually like the location more than any other location so far in JoJo's, which have all been sort of just in the background. But Mario, it really felt like a place, had a proper sense of place, um, which I felt was really great. I'm a big fan of that sort of thing. So, yeah, I was a big fan of this in premise. And we have a pretty good main cast of characters, I would say, starting off with our protagonist, Josuke. Important things to note about him. He's quite over the top. He's a bit more like a young Joseph than Jotaro. Um, he's very compassionate, and that's reflected in his stand, which has the ability to repair things and heal people um, when it punches them, which is just cool in concept, and it's a pretty powerful stand as well. Um, and I didn't think he wasn't my favorite of this sort of main group of people, but I did very much appreciate him um, as a protagonist. I thought he was completely fine. Um, yeah, but also not much to talk about, I guess. Um, at least compared to some people, namely Jojo for a start, who, as a character, is was a lot more enjoyable this time around. Maybe because he was not the primary protagonist, and rather he was just like in the background a bit more, which sort of fits his personality more, since he's not really that over the top kind of guy that really is like the face of, well, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. He's not a bizarre person in personality anyway. And it also means he sort of takes on this mentoring role, as he still probably has the strongest stand. Star Platinum is just ridiculous. And he's just, yeah, he's often not around. Turns out he was also writing a paper on crabs or something they say at the end to get his doctorate, um, which I just thought was funny. But it does explain why he's not around a lot of the time, because he doesn't have anything else to be doing. He's just staying in a hotel for probably months. Um, when he does show up, he's always useful, he's calm, he's collected, he knows what he's doing. He doesn't necessarily come out unscathed, but that's reasonable. And he does still learn pretty regularly, because some of these stands are really ridiculous and really strong. You know, on par with the sort of Vanilla Ice and Dios of Part 3, but like more consistently. Um, so yeah, really enjoyed that, and I thought he was probably my favorite this time around, um, and pretty great. And also Joseph, he does show up later to see his son, but he's not like a mainstay. There's sort of a main five, and he's not a part of that. But I thought I'd talk about him here as well because it just makes more sense. And he's really just an old man at this point. He still somewhat has it, but they also make some, classic senile jokes, um, with him. He ends up finding this baby that can turn invisible, which I just thought was a bit of a forgettable premise. And largely he's not really the same person he was in Part 3, which makes sense. Um, so on the whole, I would say I was a fan of that. I was a fan of the changes they made to Joseph. I thought they made sense because that's how aging works. Um, and yeah, also really liked his design. Old Joseph. He's aged as you would expect. Um, and then we have, uh, I'm gonna butcher it, but let's have a go. Okuyasu. He is the brother of the guy who originally has the bow at the start of the story, except he loses it later, um, like almost immediately, and is killed. And so Okuyasu is basically, in a sense, trying to get revenge for his brother dying. And he also goes to school with Josuke. They're both school age, you know, penultimate or final year. Um, and he's similarly energetic, but not necessarily as compassionate. And he has an interesting stand. It is essentially Vanilla Ice's stand, but it has less of a punch, but also is easier to like deploy the removingness of it. And also importantly, when he removes things, the space he removes closes up, which means he can use it to sort of pull things towards him and things, which is important. It comes important in the final fight of the entire thing, which is just Josuke and Okuyasu against our ultimate villain, Kira. Um, overall, I'd say he's probably the least memorable of the sort of main five, but he's not unmemorable. He's enjoyable. He's fun, and he's a great sort of person for Josuke to bounce off a lot of the time because they're very similar in personality, and they hang out all the time, and they're really obviously good friends, and that's very clear. And it's nice to see him end up getting revenge because without him, Josuke probably would have lost the fight, and Kira would have won, and it would be over. Um, so yeah, he contributes and he helps get revenge, I guess. Although technically, not the person who killed his brother, but still. Um, then we have Koichi. I don't know. I don't even know if I spelled that right. He's like a much younger child. He's only in middle school, I think. And he's, obviously short and such. Um, he is struck with the bow and gets stand powers because of it, um, which evolve from Echoes 1 and 2 and then 3, and they have different powers. Echoes 1, I don't even remember if it did anything. Echoes 2, oh yeah, no, they have the same power, don't they? Echoes 2 is just stronger Echoes 1, where they can plant sound effects on people, and then whatever that sound effect implies ends up happening, which is a really interesting idea. It's obviously very loose, but there's no reason for any sort of defining of how that really works. Um, and it's very enjoyable. Um, and he's a, you know, admirable young guy. That's what a fucking terrible way of wording that. But um, he's got very steadfast, basic morals and principles that you'd find in a lot of sort of good kids. He's sort of a stereotypical good kid. Um, and it's enjoyable to watch him grow along with his stand. Although I did feel that his arc maybe was cut short slightly. He doesn't contribute to the final fight, which is fine, but also it feels like he never fully was like synced up with the final version of Echoes, at least to me. So it felt a little like he was the only person whose sort of arc was completely cut off out of the main five, and that was a little disappointing. But still, good character, good arc, and I mean, I suspect he'll be back. Because he's only a child, and as I just said, incomplete. He's not yet sort of finished growing as a character. And then finally, we have Rohan, by far the latest of the main characters to be introduced, but also the second best after Jotaro. So he's a manga artist, which is obviously important. He's a bit of a self-insert, I suspect. And he has the ability to turn people's faces into a story about their lives, and then he can basically read their memories, which is obviously useful because they don't even realize it's happening, and so you can realize that, you can just gain a lot of information from it. Additionally, he's initially an enemy who sort of traps Koichi and this other kid by like continuously taking information from them and then making them forget that any bad shit happened, basically, by writing that they just forgot, and using it to make his manga. But pretty soon after, he sort of becomes inevitably tied into the main conflicts because he was almost killed by the main villain when he was a child. So he has that personal investment in this story, which nobody else really does. There's this ghost girl who was the first victim of serial killer Kira, who saved him when he was a child. So there's an investment there um, for Rohan, and obviously since he doesn't have any sort of combative ability, there's no reason for him to really be in that final confrontation. He does everything he can through intel gathering, and he contributes, and he sort of gets the revenge that he needs without needing to actually fight Kira himself, which is great, and it's awesome to see him contribute, and he sort of almost takes over as the protagonist from Josuke for a brief period because he is doing so much from the trying to work out who the killer is side of things. Um, so yeah, and then final person to talk about before we get into the big bad guy would be Yukako, who is another stand user who has basically a massive crush on Koichi. Um, so she kidnaps him, and she's also same as Rohan, initially an enemy, turned ally. She kidnaps him. They have a fight. Echo's version 2, I think, is unlocked, I guess, during that. Um, and generally, I thought she was quite surprisingly sympathetic and enjoyable, especially later when she's just trying to win over Koichi. And it does work, to at least to some degree, which I thought was nice. With the help of this Cinderella lady, who I can't remember the actual name of, but her stand's name is Cinderella. Um, but yeah, just a great little supporting character. I thought I'd just shout out there as well. Um, but anyway, by far the most important thing, and the best character, apart from maybe Jotaro, in this manga, by far, would be Kira, the villain. Who, at least compared to Dio for now, because I think Dio is going to come back again, a third and maybe even 4 times, who even knows. Compared to Dio in parts 1 and 3, he sort of blows Dio out of the water in terms of how good of a villain he is. Which is interesting because he's nowhere near as threatening because he has no like ambition to take over the world and become like the richest, most powerful guy. He just wants to live his serial killer everyday life and kill women. Specifically, he does have a sort of pretty believable serial killer traits, which I thought was enjoyable. Also, his stand is called Killer Queen, and it has an ability called Sheer Heart Attack, which I just thought was a really good reference, really. There's lots of music references in this. I missed some, I'm sure, but that was one that I immediately was drawn to. Yeah. And his stand is basically just another humanoid, except it can blow anything up it touches, and also has like a remote control heat-seeking bomb, and is generally very strong. I would say it's probably second only to Star Platinum in the series, even stronger than the world. And it's beaten by Josuke just because Josuke is smarter than Kira when it comes to combat, really. And also, Okuyasu is there, so there's 2 people. After he sort of found out the first time, he ends up assuming another person's identity and basically disguising himself as them, which is important because it means they have to find him again. This is where all the intel gathering with Rohan has to come in. And it leads to some really interesting stuff, which I'll talk about later. But it also really shows him as a character is just a really creepy and sinister guy, and that's really great. We see a lot more of him than we do of Dio in part 3, and that definitely helps a lot. So I'm sort of moving into the actual plot now. So, long before we even know Kira exists, There's an original sort of foe here. We're talking about this electricity fella who has a stand that can sort of become electricity and is powered by electricity. Um, who I've forgotten the name of because it was a while ago, and he's not that memorable. His stand is memorable, but when the actual user shows up, it's not particularly memorable. Um, and a bunch of other people who have stands that are really not very strong and are basically just there to get the characters other than Jotaro used to the idea of fighting other stand users. Um, like the guy Angelo, who can just sort of turn into liquid. His stand can just turn into liquid, which isn't particularly useful. Um, Obviously, it actually is quite useful, but it's not like he doesn't use it particularly effectively. Um, a lot of the time. And who else is there? Fuck. There's like a guy who can put a lock on your heart, and then you have to like. I can't even really remember. But anyway, basically, the early parts of this didn't have me too invested. I was sort of not happy, and I was missing part 3 until Kira showed up. But the highlight, first of all, we've got these two who are sort of allies who originally seem like they're enemies, but it's just a misdirection. Cinderella, she can change your face, which is useful. Yukaku uses it, but also there's like a catch to it. There's like this, the substance style thing where she has to put this lipstick on every 30 minutes or something bad will happen. It's all very, but the more important one is definitely the chef, who is basically only there for the one time, and he's just really fun. He just makes food that's like so ridiculously good. It like heals parts of your body in really ridiculous ways, like by removing by like heating up one part of your shoulder. For some reason all of the energy from the food goes into your shoulder. I don't know how that works, but it's fucking awesome, so I don't care. um and it heats up so much all the dirt like falls off of it, and it's all really fucking, it's kind of gnarly. How much dirt was on Okuyasu's shoulder was pretty impressive as well. But yeah, very intriguing and just really funny moment. Probably my favorite part of this early stuff. But anyway, after defeating Mr. Electricity, and we meet the ghost girl, and we start to know Kira exists. One of the highlights has got to be the rat. A rat that has been hit by the arrow from the bow and arrow and is a stand user, which is obviously insane. But we already had a baby and an orangutan and whatever last time, and a bird. This rat can like melt people with this dart gun turret that it is its stand, and it ends up nearly killing Jotaro. And it's just really fucking threatening, and also it's just a really, really good stand. The whole melting thing, it's very gnarly, which I appreciate, and also creative, which I appreciate, considering the name of the manga. Um, so overall, really happy with that. In a good mood. Yeah. Another highlight pre-Kira is Shigekiyo, who is another school-age student. I cannot tell you how old. Who looks insane. He has like spikes in the back of his head and stuff. Anyway, he basically has a little hive mind stand of like little insect guys, which he uses to pick up money to make him rich, and then Josuke and Okuyasu are sort of blinded by the easy money, work with him to make a lot more money. However, not long after that, he ends up completely accidentally discovering Kira by the fact that Kira who walks around with his victim's hand in his like pocket, which is obviously a ridiculously stupid decision, but I get it. Serial killers are stupid. Um, he puts it in his sandwich bag, and then the sandwich bag gets mixed up with Shigekio's sandwich, and then there's a massive like thing of hijinks where it nearly goes the whole day without like seeing the sandwich has been replaced with a hand, which is really funny, and it's kind of yeah. And at this point, I didn't realize how big a deal Kira was going to be. I didn't assume he was going to be the big final guy, but he is. Excuse me, I need a drink. But yeah, he ends up killing Shigekio, which was both shocking because he's a child, and I'm really happy with it. Rest in peace to the guy. He didn't deserve it. And I wish we got a little more of him, but it was such a good death, and it's such a good motivator because it sets up, it means that everyone basically now is under threat and has a motivation to hunt down the serial killer beyond the simple moral obligation that being a serial killer is bad. So in that way, it's really important structurally, and I was a big fan of the decision. But yeah. As for other stuff with Kira, the next thing that happens is they track down a button falls off his suit. They track down the button and they find the suit. It's in like a tailor's for repairs. Kira shows up at the same time. Koichi and Jojo are there. He nearly kills them both because the little remote control missile is indestructible, even by Star Platinum. And yeah, it's a very impressive scene. It really shows how ridiculously threatening his stand is. It really is incredibly strong. My headset is all tangled in other wires, which is annoying me right now. Apologies. Let me just sort that out as best as I can. There we go. But yeah, he's very threatening, and he's very charming isn't the right word, but he's very he hooks you in really with the way he talks and the way he acts. Is very Patrick Bateman-y in a way, but with a lot more almost campiness. I really was a fan of it. And he's introduced very well, and it helps that his father turned himself into a ghost so that he could help him. So Kira isn't actually running like this network of all these stand users who are in Morio. That's his dad, who's doing it behind his back. And he's the one with the bow and arrow. So he's the real like guy technically, but he's no threat because he's just a ghost. He can only exist in like pictures. For some reason, I guess it's just, parental love being eternal or whatever. He's completely fine with his son being a killer. But whatever. He keeps putting arrows in people in order to make more stand users, and we get some. This is where the really threatening people come in, who I've written at least I think all of them, definitely all of the memorable ones here, apart from the alien who isn't a stand user. But yeah, very enjoyable across the board, and the gang have to deal with these guys before they can find Kira. First of all, we've got I don't remember their names. I apologize. Rock paper scissors thing. This kid plays rock paper scissors with you. Best of 3, and every time he wins, he steals a third of your stand. Which also means he gains like a third of the ability. He specifically is pitted against Rohan, so there's no fighting involved here. Also, he doesn't really realize what's going on, but he does enjoy himself a fair bit. And he's an enjoyable individual. He basically is relying on being lucky, and he is eventually outlucked by Rohan. Um, and he learns that, you can't always be lucky, I guess. And it's yeah, pretty good, but not the best. Then we have Yuya, who I remember the name of because he shows up again later. He's like a biker. He has a crash. After he's crashed, he's shot with the arrow. He's in the hospital while his stand is running around, causing a bunch of havoc. His stand is very useful for a number of reasons. First of all, he can smell really well, which I think he might have been able to do before, but it's very strange. Second of all, his stand can run up to 60 kilometers per hour. I think it could be miles, but either way, it's incredibly fast. And also, it just looks like footprints, so it's not that hard to see. The original fight basically involves Josuke on a motorbike trying to not drop below 60 miles an hour, otherwise he'll be caught, and if he's caught, it's basically over for him. Obviously, it sounds not too difficult, but he's trying to get to the hospital, which is in the middle of the city. There's traffic, he has to go around corners, it's difficult. But he does find a way, which obviously is great. Yuya, he later shows up again as an ally because Josuke heals him, and then he agrees to help sniff out Koichi because Koichi disappeared. He was kidnapped by the stand user that he ends up fighting. But then the more important thing for now is the next thing we get is the alien and also the pylon guy, who was very entertaining. This was probably the most entertaining, just sort of funny and fun thing to happen. Probably. So this alien just shows up, who can turn into basic objects, including shoes, but not like mechanical stuff, because that would be too OP. And Okuyasu, Josuke, and the alien are just walking around when they spot this guy who's living in a pylon, because of course. Basically, the pylon is actually this guy's stand, and it's a trap. If there has to be one person in it all the time, which means that this guy is stuck inside his own stand, and obviously it's a pylon, he can't move it. The moment Josuke walks in, he like jumps out, and obviously the way they have to do this is they have to find a way to get him back inside of the pylon so that they can get Josuke back out again. Which is easier said than done because he's very good at walking around on the pylon, and also the pylon reflects all the energy pummeled into it back in the form of like lasers, which he uses by like cutting it and stuff so that the lasers fire at the enemies and stuff. It's very cool. And this goes very entertaining. The alien comes in handy by pretending to be like cables and screws and stuff in the pylon. And then he goes away. I don't actually remember what happened after that to the alien, but the pylon guy gets defeated. He agrees. Maybe he actually just likes living inside a pylon. I don't think he does because he was trying to leave, but maybe he does. And he'd been in there for 3 years, by the way, without anyone coming in. And he probably will never leave again, which sucks. Then after that we have the single funniest moment with this paper guy in the entire series by a mile. It's so funny. So, this is also where Yuya comes in. This guy um, is like chilling, and he obviously has Koichi because Yuya can like smell it on him. It's just Yuya and Josuke here. Um, and then there's this like he disappears. There's a piece of paper on the ground. Josuke picks up the paper, and then he like looks at the back side, and then he turns it around to the front, and there's nothing on the back. And then he turns it back around to the back, and then there's just like a gun on the back side of the paper pointed at him, and then he gets like shot point blank in the face by a gun. And it's like the funniest thing I've ever fucking. I was like so unexpected and genuinely funny. And obviously this sort of thing is that he can turn stuff into pieces of paper and then jump out the paper. He can turn himself into paper. He turned Koichi into a piece of paper. And obviously he can turn a gun into a piece of paper. It's an interesting power. He can only turn people into paper when they sort of do an action they wouldn't actually do out of fear, like biting their lip or something. He gets Josuke, but then he is defeated by Yuya, who tricks him into turning him into a piece of paper in a way that allows him to free other pieces of paper from a shredder, which are Koichi's paper and Josuke's, among some other ones probably. Which is just very silly. It's not a particularly memorable like actual conflict. It's just that the gun is very funny and very memorable. And then we have the guy who appears on your back. This guy goes after Rohan again because he is doing the most work at this point for like finding Kira. And he doesn't have a user in the traditional sense. It's just a stand and it attaches to random people. If they see that person's back, then it will jump to the next user and kill the first one because it's like dug into their back. And it ends up on Rohan's back. I'm not really going to get into the gist of how it's defeated because I should have probably discussed that entire thing earlier and I don't really know how to explain it. But he is defeated by trickery, basically. But it's just a really interesting stand. There's not much else to say. In the meantime, we keep cutting back to Kira and his new life as the person he disguised himself as, who is just like a family man. He's got a wife and he's got a son. The son, Hayato, is very suspicious of what's going on. The wife is just sort of, she notices the difference, but she's just attracted to it, so she chooses to ignore it, basically. But the son is very on it. He knows what's going on. Also, there's a cat who gets shot with the bow and arrow, or gets hit with the arrow, because the bow is disposed of. It's just the arrow now. And the dad keeps going around and stabbing people with the arrow. But the cat dies. It's resurrected as a flower, and then the flower cat, which has eyeballs, can shoot the air very powerfully to the degree that it like rips off a toenail, and also can like shoot through people. I guess the toenail's not really relevant, is it? But that's just the first thing that the cat does. But yeah. And Kira uses it as a gun in the final fight. But also it's important because the kid discovers it and obviously he's very freaked out and then he really starts to do his investigating. Also, we get to see from the perspective of the cat and that's quite funny to witness. First of all, the cat realized that it's been turned into a flower and also that it can shoot air and like we're talking like sort of similar to Bartholomew Kuma, I guess, if you're trying to like comprehend it. But obviously, it's not One Piece, so it's much more damaging than what Kuma's doing, because there's no way of protecting yourself. Anyway, this kid is great. He's doing a lot of work, but he's also. It's not like Kira hasn't worked out that the kid is onto him. So he still is a serious threat. And then we get the final confrontation, which is interesting for a number of reasons. So Kira gets hit with the arrow again for a second time, and he develops a new ability where he can basically hide his stand in time, then it blows up and goes back in time, and then what he blew up will inevitably blow up at that time, even if he's not there, which he uses to basically make a time loop where Rohan always blows up and dies. And it's only stopped because Hayato tricks him into admitting that he's Kira while Josuke is stood behind him without him realizing, so then Josuke realizes, and then they get into the actual final conflict, which I've sort of talked about in quite a lot of detail already, and it's great. You've got the cat firing stuff, but the cat gets pulled away by Okuyasu, like, swiping the air, and then it's removed, and then he gets pulled forward, so that's how Okuyasu contributes, and that's great. And then they hide in this house while Kira is trying to fight them in the house. They kill Kira's dad, who's like spying on them inside the house, and they go outside and beat up Kira. Then Kira tries to blow up this lady so he can reverse time again and go back to earlier, but it doesn't work because Jojo finally shows up and stops time and sorts it all out, basically. And that's the final fight. It's pretty good. I've recapped it terribly, but it is very engaging. And importantly, all of the 5 main protagonists contributed in some way to catching Kira at the end, even if Rohan only did it by working out who he was. And it's pretty great. And that's it. Yeah. So, I thought it'd be fun, because it's almost impossible. I wouldn't have predicted anything that happened there was going to happen in this part. I would have thought it was going to try and get even bigger, and we'd maybe even go to space, was genuinely my thought. So I thought it'd be fun to try and predict what's going to happen, and importantly, who's going to show up again in part 5. Because I can't really predict the plot, because anything could happen. I'm going to guess it's ahead in time, and there's somebody who's distantly related to... Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Someone who's distantly related to the Joestar family. But beyond that, I couldn't tell you. Yeah, it's just going to be set in like the early 2000s, I think part 5 was made. That'll probably be when it's set. And yeah. So, important things I want to predict. So, will Dio be back? Because I know he's coming back for the 3 time, at least. My prediction is no. I think he might be for 6 or 7, or maybe 8. And I think also, I don't know how many parts they're supposed to end up being. I'm guessing 10. But he'll probably be in the final part as well. But yeah. I don't think he's going to be in part 5. I don't think Joseph will be in part 5 because he's too old. I think he'll be dead by the time we get to the time part 5 is set. But I think Jojo should be back. I think Josuke should be back. I hope both of them are back. And honestly, this is a strange prediction. Koichi, I think, could be back because he's still a child. He has lots of room to grow, but he might come back in like 6. Is my prediction. And also, I think Yuya, the like biker guy, I think he's gonna make a return. But other than that, I think they might be leaving these people behind. Okuyasu, his story's complete. He just needs to live his normal life now. That's fine. There's no reason for him to come back. Same with Rohan. They're wrapped up. They've had lots of growth. They can probably go back to living regular old lives. And I imagine they probably would want to. So I don't think either of them have really any chance of coming back. For part 5. I don't think part 5 will be set in Morio. I don't think we're going to ever come back to Morio. But Yuya, you never know. He has an awesome stand, and I like the fact that he can smell. So I want him to come back. I want him to come back. That's all I've got to say. And yeah, that's it. Those are my thoughts. 7 out of 10. Enjoyed it a lot. Excited for part 5. But I won't be getting around to it for a while because I have some exams to deal with now. But yeah, awesome. If you're still watching, I don't know if you will be, judging by the analytics I've seen for the other videos. But still, Uh, if you are, thanks a lot. Thanks a bunch. Um, yeah. Bye.